Today we're looking at Proverbs chapter 26. It's an interesting proverb. Like I said, many of the proverbs are thematic. What happens is that some of them they seem a little random, but they focus on one point seemingly. If he gets an idea or a thought, he tends to run with it. Now remember, we did say that in 22 through 26, it's all about, it was made at the time of Hezekiah. Someone went through the Proverbs of Solomon and picked up ones that were specifically for a king. And the idea is that this is something that kings need to know. So it talks about the heart of a king. Actually, it's in 25, 25 through 29 is about the heart of a king. And 25 talks about kings and kingly understanding. And 26 is all about the fool. It seems like we're flipping. These are one of these bookend ideas where one is about a king and the other one is now about a fool. You'll find the word fool is used about 6 to 8 times or more inside of this. There's only 28 verses, and yet we hear the word fool coming up. As snow in summer and as rain in harvest, so honor is not seemingly for a fool. And I know that people don't like the word fool, but if you're going to be a foolish person and not learn, this is what happens. Is a fool is someone who will not take instruction. They will not take reproof. They've got it figured out, and they're going to roll with it. When you're a grid work Christian like we are, you're always learning about the Bible, and you're learning something new. And when you learn something new, you change. This is how you change yourself. A fool won't change. It talks about as a bridle, he that bindeth a stone in a sling, so is he that honoreth a fool. If you're getting ready to throw something at somebody, you put a stone in a sling. If you're honoring a fool, it's worthless. It's like putting a stone in a sling and just wasting the energy. Answer not a fool according to his folly, lest thou be like him. Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own conceit. So you don't answer him in his folly, because you're just going to create problems, and he's going to fight with you. You answer him according to it if you want to give him wisdom. And this is what happens is you want to give him wisdom. So your answer here also is to answer along his ways. If you're going to answer in wisdom. And so we have this talking about the fool. And again, kings have to stand. The opposite of wisdom is foolishness. And again, a person given to foolishness is a fool. A person given to wisdom is wise. So again, we're drawing these major distinctions. A slothful man says, there's a lion in the way, there's a lion in the street. He's finding a reason to get out of work. As the door turns on its hinges, so does the slothful upon his bed. The slothful hides his hand in his bosom. It grieves him to bring it out again to his mouth. Oh, how horrible it is. Oh, I don't want to feed myself. Please, someone else take care of me. I'm grieved. Where no wood is, the fire goeth out, and where there is no talebearer, the strife ceases. The idea, you need a talebearer, you need a scorner, you need a gossiper to keep gossip rolling. So that's what we have here. A sluggard is wiser in his own conceit than 7 men that can render a reason. He thinks he's smarter in his own brain than 7 men. So again, we keep going on and on about what a fool is. As coals are to burning coals, and wood to fire, so is contentious man to kindle strife. A contentious man will create strife and will kindle strife. And here we have, just like coals that keep coals burning, and wood that keeps fire burning, so a contentious man. So we want to learn about wisdom, and we also need to know the juxtaposition, which is foolishness. So look over 26. It's got a lot of good ideas. If you see foolishness in you, stop it. If you see a fool, be very careful. Don't let him rub off on you. Going back to 1 Chronicles 24, we see the idea that that David is getting ready to set up the house for God. He wants to do it, but the prophet told him, no, it won't be under you, it'll be your son. So he goes, okay, I will prepare. So he gets all the gold, silver, the brass. He gets all the different people. He organizes this for his son. And we see in 23 that he starts working with gathering together all of the Levites by their family. Again, we looked at the 3 different families here of the Levites, the Gershonites, the Korathites, and those of Merari. And those men will now not be taking the tabernacle on their shoulder. They're actually now going to be officiating all over Jerusalem and in the area off in Israel. So he gets them all lined out here. In 24, he starts talking about the sons of Aaron. Remember, Aaron was the son of Korathite. Korloth. He was Korathite. But he is special. He and Moses were set apart as special. The sons of Aaron are special priests, that they have special officiations. They will take care of the temple. They will take care of the temple proper. And they're going to move in troops. It's not like one person does it all the time. They're setting it up to where the sons of Aaron will come in, like one group will serve every 2 weeks. So like you'll serve for 2 weeks, then someone else will. There's 24 allotments. And these men were chosen by lot. The princes were chosen by lot of the sons of Aaron, and they would go through and do their 2 weeks and then move out, and another group would move in. We see this with, again, when we're talking about later on with Zechariah and Elizabeth, how he was in his officiation. He was in his 2 weeks as a Levite, as a part of the tribe of Levi. And that's when God told him about John the Baptist, and John the Baptist's name would be John. He wouldn't listen, so he lost his tongue for a while. He became mute. But the idea here is you have all of these lined out, that these men and the men that came after them from these families. And again, I maintain that Chronicles is made to encourage and strengthen and organize the Israelites into their proper form for later on also. But this was David organizing them at the time, right before the first brick was dropped, before the first, bull was killed on the temple, before the temple was even made. There was the organization and the structure of the worshipers of God. You had, again, the Levites were brought in and organized. You had also now you have the divisions of the sons of Aaron will be taken down, and we know which families those are. And again, the idea is that once they come back from Babylon, that they would line up behind these families and pick up this generational, I wouldn't say burden. Burden is a negative word. Responsibility is a better word. So he goes through all of them here. Also in 25 is interesting because he has singers. And they will come in, and they're different. We have them from Aspah. Now, if you remember, when we were doing Proverbs, you'll say a psalm for Aspah, or a psalm from Aspah. Aspah was a singer, and there were other men who were singers around the time of David. So, again, we see a connection here between Aspah and David. So here he has these men come up, and the sons of Aspah and Heman and Yehuda come in to prophesy with harps and psalters and with cymbals and with a number of workmen according to the service. And it talks about their sons. And it says they prophesied. Again, prophecy is not just this thing where, it's kind of spooky-ooky, I'm telling you about the future. Prophecy is also relating a truth. If I talk about God is going to establish himself, he's going to establish himself in Jerusalem, he's going to establish himself with the king, that's a form of prophecy. If I say not just what God will do, in a sense of something, he's going to set up this and he's going to do that, but what he is doing and his plans for Jerusalem are very important here. So these people are not just prophesying. Prophecy also goes backwards. When you give songs about what God did, that's a form of prophecy. So we have these men listed here. He says to number them from their brethren according to the songs of the Lord, and all with cunning. And there were 288 and with cunning, these guys just weren't singing out of tune, They knew how to create. They knew how to create good quality music. They knew how to create worship music. They knew how to do a proper recitative. They understood, the melodies, the melodics. If you're talking about something wonderful God did, if you're talking about something that we did in sin and then he does in righteousness, you might change certain timbres and tones, just like we have music today. So they went through, and it's interesting, at 25, you have a list of these men, like the Levites, and like the children of Aaron. They go in through they have their times. And it says here there's 24 groups that come in. These people will come in, and it looks like it's just, 12 at a time. 12 to 14 men at a time, maybe 3 on every corner, or they're standing up singing the same song, and so these people would hear these songs, these recitatives, these verses, day and night, They would work through it, and they would have their 2 weeks. We have this starting in verse 8. They cast lots against the ward as well, the great and the small, the teacher as the scholar. So the people that understood singing, and good quality singing. We're talking about people who, again, had cunning and had talent. Again, sometimes we let talent go because we're afraid to hurt somebody's feelings. But here, these are talented men, and it's men singing 12 at a time. And again, it's the idea that they didn't sing for hours at a time. They might go up there for different points of time. They might have it broken up with 3s and 4s or 2s or whatever. They had the responsibility, though. It says the first was Gedaliah and his brothers and sons was 12. Then Zakur, his sons, and 12. The fourth was Isri and his sons and his brethren were 12. The fifth was Nephaniah and his sons that were 12. So you get the idea that they had 12 men in these little families that would come in and sing 2 weeks at a time, off and on. But this is a wonderful thing. We don't realize that worship and song before the Lord in remembrance of what he did is considered by God to be as important as something Levitical, as important as something that the book that Aaron did with the officiation over, the burnt offerings and the trespass offerings and all these offerings that they gave, that Aaron was responsible for. So was the songs. So we see this right here. It's an interesting thing. In 26, we line up with the porters. And who are the porters? The porters are people who carry things to and fro. They were kind of like, if you will, the janitors. They kind of kept the place clean, because places do get out of sorts. If you needed something carried in and out, these would be the guys to do it. If somebody brings something to the temple, you would be the one to make sure that it's clean, or is it according to the Levitical line? Is it not? Does it have any blemishes, etc.? You were the gatekeeper. The porters, the gatekeepers, the groundsmen. That's what these men were, and they also had their responsibilities. It's interesting. Obed-Edom, the guy who had the temple, had the Ark of the Covenant in his area, he's a part of the porters. It's the idea that God rewarded him by making him a porter. And again, we forget that porters, the people who take care of the church, or take care of, not just taking care of the church, but care for the body. And these people that cared for the temple and the temple grounds, making sure that things were done properly and in order, that there was not a defilement, that there was not a problem. They were as important here. You get the idea that the Levites, the sons of Aaron, all these singers, and the porters, he had these guys all lined up, again, before they even dropped one brick. Before they even started one wall. They were setting up, and I'm sure that they were all officiating in the tabernacle, where the Ark of the Covenant was. But they're going to move up. They're getting prepared for some serious, we're putting roots down in Jerusalem. We're saying this is where God's going to put his name. This is where we're stopping. We're dropping the Ark of the Covenant inside of a building dedicated to God right here, coming soon. And that's what we're doing here in 26. We're lining these guys up. So we see that happening. And so you have all of them named here, and where they would come in. They also had their gates. Some of them were at the south gate, some of them at the east, some on west, some are north. So you didn't just wander around. Again, we're looking at design. We're looking at functionality. We're looking at organization. Sometimes we think of these guys as kind of slipshod and kind of, just wandering around, not knowing what they're doing. God has design. He has a focus. He has plans. He has an organizational understanding. And again, our whole grid work is looking at the plan of God, looking at how God created man and woman to be, how we are to relate to our nature, how we're supposed to relate to one another, and importantly, how we are to relate to him. There are times, like we saw before, people did strange fire. People did things the wrong way. Saul decided to, sacrifice before it was time. We're going to see a lot of things. And later on, well, I'm just going to worship God how I want. We're seeing that today. I'll go and worship God however I want. I want to spread the love of Jesus any way I want. Well, no. God has his way of doing things. Do we want to serve him, or do we just want to love him? And is our goal of loving him just loving our neighbors? I want to make sure that you get the love of God. What about your love for God? What about your balance of your worship. Can you just throw anything up there? Can you live your life any way you want to? As long as I love my neighbor, I'm loving God. We're drawing these lines in the sand that are not in the Bible. We need to be very careful how we worship. So we have these guys setting up here in 26. They're setting them up on how they are going to be the keepers of the temple, the keepers of the area, the porters who bring things in and out, the gatekeepers who stop. They had power. They could stop you and say, you will not go any further. Let me see what you have. Will what you're doing defile? These were very important guys. That you couldn't get in without them. In 27, we have the chief fathers mentioned. And again, in 27, I'll mention that real quick, is these guys were, if you will, they're not really the bankers, but they are the ones who held on to and were responsible for the treasures. And when we think of treasury, I don't want to see it as treasury of, well, they have, stuff that we can use for barter. This was not for barter. When the treasure was brought in, it was protected and it was holy because it was dedicated to God. Remember when David would go out and he would get plunder for himself, he would get for himself, he would also dedicate things to God in saying that this is what God has done. God gave me the glory here. God gave me the glory over the Philistines. God gave me the glory over the Moabites. God gave me the glory over the Ammonites. I surely did not defeat those in Syria or the ones down in Edom. It was God who did it, and I'm going to give him glory by giving him physical representations of my thankfulness. And the treasures belong to God. And these men here, you'll see that they had a responsibility of not just guarding that stuff, but they had 24,000 men here. They also officiated throughout Israel. That these were leading men who went in 24,000 at a time, and they had their courses. A little bit of wind here. They had their courses about how they were to rule. Now the children of Israel, after their number to wit, the chief fathers and captains of thousands and hundreds, and their officers that served the king in any matter of the courses, came in and went out month by month through all the months of the year in every course for 24,000. So 24,000 men would be responsible throughout Israel to be men of stature, men over the treasures. They were responsible. It says here in 27, they kept an eye not just on the treasures, but they kept their eye on the vineyards. It says as they were over the king's treasuries. They were over the work of the tillage of the ground. They were over the vineyards. They were over the wine cellars. They were over the olive trees and the sycamore trees and the low plains. They were over the herds. They were over the camels. They were over the flocks and the substance, which was King David's. Let me tell you something. When David became king, everything was his, and actually everything was God's. And so he was holding them accountable. These men were to make sure that there was that things in the olive trees and having to do with olive was done correctly. Things that were done in the vineyards were done correctly because this is for the king. Things that were taken care of with the camels and with the herds and with the substance of the flocks, you did a certain way because they were the kings. Now I know that these people also got to join into the bounty of what the king had provided, but they wouldn't have that if it wasn't for the king. If it wasn't for the king, Israel would not exist, and Israel would not exist without its king, which is Jehovah. So you see where everything in Israel belonged to Jehovah. He had also belonged to the king to take care of, and it belonged to these 24,000 men to go over it 2 weeks at a time to make sure that people were doing the vineyards correctly, that people were doing the wines correctly, that people were doing the olives and the herds and the camels. Because at the end of the day, it didn't belong to just that average Israelite sitting there working it out. Now, he got the benefit and he got to use it for his own. He could sell it and make profits, but he had to realize the substance was there because of the warrior, for the king, because the king had gone out to fight. But the king didn't fight unless God went and gave him the battle and the success. So you see how this is trickle down righteousness and trickle up honor and respect. You're honoring God because he set up Israel. You're honoring the king because God used the king to support and defend Israel. And therefore your substance comes from God and comes from God using the king. This is very interesting stuff when you look at it and you see it's more than just men doing this and men doing that. And you've got these men taking it seriously as they go through all of Israel. They're not out there trying to make money, excuse me, make money for themselves. They're also out there to honor God with their lives, with their time, for 2 weeks out of a year, to make sure also that the things of God are held in order because He is worthy. He's worthy of our honor. And this is something that we learn from this. This is all about honoring God. It's all about respecting the king. It's all about realizing our place in the situation. These people were only having good quality fields because God provided the rain, God provided the land, God provided the peace from your enemies, and God provided the growth. And also the fact that your cattle weren't, having stillbirths, and you were having, the flocks were growing and all these things. They had to stop and realize it all came from God. And everything we have as Christians comes from God through our King. Let's not sit and say that we own anything, but everything I have came from God, came from my King. It's very good to get these perspectives, and I think we can see that from First Chronicles, that's really they're fighting for. They're going to establish God's presence on the earth, and they're taking it seriously, getting all these men lined up before they even drop a brick. We're going to have this all organized. That's very cool. Thank you.